right. Well, welcome everyone. This is episode number 2 of the Writing History podcast. And today I am with one of the people that I look up to most in this world. Really just a mentor to me, a person who um, always is trying to do what's best for everyone else. And so he really is just a great guy. And it's Mr. Haydock. Mr. Haydock, welcome to the show.
Hey everybody, how are you?
So I'm super excited to have you on today. I love talking to you. We've been hanging out together at lunch for years and years and years. We've done some outside of school activities as well. And you're just a lot of fun to hang out with. And I know that your students adore you as well. There are things that you do inside of your classroom that are really amazing at building relationships with kids. So I know like a you have like a dance that you do for kids every once in a while. I saw I saw on was it Facebook the other day, you and your family saying happy birthday to a couple of your students. That was
Special birthday song, nerdy birthday.
it was pretty rad. I watched it probably 32 times. I watched it a bunch. It was absolutely great. Um, And then one of the things that we know and love you for are these things called Haydock jokes. And they're jokes that make me laugh every single time. So, in honor of you being here, I have a Haydock joke for you. Um,
Excellent, excellent. And I want to say thank you first of all because you are the only person at lunch that consistently laughs at my jokes. I won't explain the nickname that the colleagues have given me for that, but I do appreciate it a lot.
I am an easy audience. That has been one of my traits my whole life. All right, so here's my Haydock joke. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. Last night, I dreamed I was swimming in an ocean of orange soda, but it was just a fantasy.
See that's why I said that you should do it and not me because I could never have come up with something like that on command. That is I'm going to add that to my repertoire.
Okay, okay. I
I
saw
The
one.
only one that comes to mind right now is one that I heard on years and years ago on Prairie Home Companion, uh, which this is one of my favorite jokes ever. Did you hear about the kidnapping in Ohio?
No.
No, don't worry, he woke up.
Yep, perfect. Yeah, no, I saw one the other day online that definitely made me think about you and this whole podcast. And here's what it is. Um, what kind of jokes are the CDC recommending right now?
I'm thinking that's got to be inside jokes.
It is inside joke.
Woodward, another one of our colleagues, actually sent me that meme. It had a dog saying it, and
Yeah,
I like it.
so pretty cool. It's a lot of
Inside jokes are very appropriate right now.
we
Social.
and in our department we do have a lot of inside jokes. There really are a bunch. So I'm gonna take a quick drink of water and then we're gonna get down to business. Does that sound good with you?
Sounds excellent.
Right.
We won't be repeating many of those departmental inside jokes though on the podcast. I don't think.
No, no, absolutely. Because if we did, they wouldn't be inside jokes. They would be everybody jokes, and then we can enjoy them at the same
Absolutely.
time.
Although I let me just add something here because we do actually have one person in our department now that was a former student. So if you really want to know what those inside jokes are, graduate, get your credential, come back and work for us, and you'll be subjected to them constantly.
Yeah, become one of us.
Absolutely.
All right. So today, I do like to have an academic time. This is for our students, for our kids, and so I know that you and I don't have a whole lot of kids that have you and me, or have had you and then have me. We kind of teach in different pathways. We're in the same subject area. We just our kids take different paths. Um, So I like to do this. I like to do things that kind of would work for both kids. And I think we have a subject today that is a great bridge between what you do and what I do, specifically for my government kids and for your philosophy kids, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, what would you like to talk about today, Mr. Haydock?
Well, what I was thinking of is to talk about kind of some of the philosophical dimensions of what we're going through right now.
Sure.
Um, I think that is on everybody's mind. I mean, here we are cooped up at home, and um, we're wondering what's going on. Um,
Yeah.
so I think what I find when you teach philosophy, almost everything that happens in the world becomes interesting, even if it's tragic. And I think that's what we're looking at today is that we have this global tragedy going on, and I don't want to underplay the tragic nature of it, but it also is in a lot of ways I think teaching us some things that I think especially we here in the modern West desperately need to remember,
Mm.
and that is that we are part of the world. We are part of nature. We are not over and above the environment that we live in. And I think that if you go back the last 200-300 years in the Western world, science has advanced and our understanding has advanced, and I think a lot of that has made us feel like we are the masters, and that the world does what we want it to do, and we are the masters. And
Yeah.
boy, this current situation is really reiterating the fact that we are part of the world. We are subject to the world. We are not the masters of everything we survey.
Mm.
And if there is any, possible silver lining to the current horrific situation we're going through, I hope it's that we understand that more. That we are not we are not gods. We are mortal, and we are subject to the same uh, perils as every other living thing on this planet. And I think this is something that if you lived in many other countries, you'd take for granted the fact that you're subject to the world. But I think we're so isolated in the prosperity that we have in modern America that it almost seems like we're invincible. And sadly, I think this is demonstrating that we're not.
Well, do you think this will change anyone's kind of viewpoint in this country about our place in it and what we take for granted and what we don't? Or do you think we're gonna come through this and just go back to business as usual?
I tend to be a little bit on the optimistic side in general, and so I'm going to say that I think we are going to learn something from this, and I think the lessons that we're going to learn are this situation is going to have some real far-reaching impacts. I mean, we just got the notification yesterday that we're out of school now until April 20th.
Yeah.
My daughter's district just notified this morning that they're out until May 1st.
Mm.
Uh, those dates could be pushed back. We may end up losing the rest of the year. We are uncertain at this point. This
Yeah.
is absolutely unprecedented, and I think a lot of people who are used to the regularity of modern post-industrial life in a developed country, they expect that everything's going to be expectable. There's nothing unpredictable that's going to happen. And I think that this is really demonstrating that the unpredictable does still happen, and we are still subject to a lot of the forces that we thought that we had brought to control. So
Yeah.
I'm going to be optimistic, and I'm going to say, yeah, I think we are going to learn from it, and I think we are going to come out of it stronger than we were before.
Okay. Well, I think I'm gonna ask a question that I think is on a lot of people's minds, and that is, are we overreacting to this? Shutting everything down, closing down schools, closing down pretty much most industry in the United States. Is this an overreaction, or is there some kind of philosophical idea or speaker that would or not speaker, philosophical thinker who would be able to explain what we're doing and why we're doing it?
Well, let me just, before I go to the philosophy,
Sure.
my personal opinion is that what we're looking at now is not an overreaction. Um, and I'm going to say it's not an overreaction because we've seen what happens when basically very significant steps are not taken. If you look at the situation in Wuhan province during January and February, if you look at the situation in Italy, if you look at the situation now that's going on in New York, quite frankly, um, this is exceptionally serious. Many lives are at stake, and there's a heck of a lot of suffering that's happening as a result of this. There's no way to overstate that kind of human suffering. And I honestly believe, I mean, this is just my particular background, we need to avoid human suffering. That needs to be job one for us. Okay, if there is a way that human suffering can be avoided, we should be willing to pay that price. We should be willing to bear that burden. So I don't think it's an overreaction, to be honest with you. And I think some people might say, well, in Stanislaus County where I'm at, there are only I think now 13 cases. People might say, oh, 13 cases, that's not that bad. But how many of those are 13 cases we know about? How many cases do we not know about that we would be spreading if we were not all sequestered in our houses?
Yep.
So I don't think it's an overreaction in any way, shape, or form. I think there are a couple of philosophers that help us to understand kind of how to frame this issue. One of them is going to be the utilitarian philosophies of Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. And I think in world history, you touched briefly about the utilitarians usually looking at responses to industrialism in the 19th century.
Yeah.
And basically, utilitarianism says that is good that generates the greatest good for the greatest number. And so the utilitarians are basically saying whenever you have a situation, weigh your options. Okay, look at if we take option A, what's that? How much happiness is that going to result in? If we take option B, how much happiness is that going to result in? So that the utilitarians have this simple kind of cost-benefit calculus by which we could determine what the right course of action is. And I think, to a certain extent, applied to our situation today, if you're taking a utilitarian view, you're probably going to be asking about, which is going to be more painful, closing down the economy and avoiding getting the disease more widespread and crushing our medical system, or leaving the economy open so the economy doesn't take the damage, but then risking more people getting the disease and overwhelming our healthcare system.
Yep.
That's a simple trade-off, simple cost-benefit.
Yep.
I actually don't think that the utilitarian approach, though, is the best approach to take in situations like this, because basically the utilitarians, it kind of all comes down to numbers. How many people benefit versus how many people don't benefit. We take the larger group.
Yep.
The problem with utilitarianism is always it kind of ignores the individual. Okay, it basically says the individual isn't important. What's really important is the collective. So if you want to think about the individual, another philosopher by the name of Immanuel Kant basically says every human being has dignity, and that dignity cannot be stripped from that human being. And that dignity is like, essentially, the dignity is like an infinite quantity. So, in other words, if I was comparing, how much would it be worth for me to suffer and lose my life? Kant would say you can't make that calculation because the dignity that I possess is infinite. So your dignity is infinite, my dignity is infinite. Every human being that's rational's dignity is infinite. And what that means then is if we're going to talk about sacrificing you, for example, for the betterment of, let's say, 10 people, mathematically, from Kant's perspective, that doesn't work. That's because it's infinite versus infinite. We always have to look after the interests of each and every individual. In other words, no individual can be sacrificed for the greater good. And I think that the situation we're in now calls on us to think both in utilitarian and Kantian terms. We can't just ignore the fact that individual suffering is going to happen. We can't just say that some people are expendable. That is just, to me, not acceptable. Not in this country, anyway.
Well, I think you're right. To you and to me, I think that is definitely unacceptable. You and I would not want anyone to be sacrificed for the economic machine that we have in the United States. But there are some people who would disagree with that. Our economy is grinding to a halt. People, there are businesses that are going to be um, losing their ability to function. When we come back from this, they may not still be there. And we're talking a lot about the small local businesses, the ones that employ the people that we love and we care about. And so it's really hard when you make a choice like this to say, everyone stay home so that you don't die. When you think about what's it going to do to the livelihoods of these people who we're protecting from dying. So you're not going to die, but what's your livelihood going to be? And so how do we address that?
Well, I think that's a good question, and I don't discount the importance of economic well-being. One can, you know, I was reading an article the other day that said the economic well-being of the country has direct physical effects on people in terms of suicide rates and other things like that. So I'm not denying that the economy doesn't have a big impact. I guess what I would say, though, in response to what you brought up is um, a couple of things. First of all, we are closing down the economy. This
Yeah.
is not some mysterious thing that's happening. We
No.
are doing it. Okay. When it happens due to structural things or things that we didn't plan for, then we have to figure out what went wrong and figure out how to restart it. I think when we do a shutdown like this, where we know why it's happening, it's going to be easier to restart. Now, I'm not trying to soft pedal and say that there will be no damage, but I think it will be easier to restart than say during the Great Depression or even the Great Recession from 2008 2009.
Hmm.
Um, and I had a second point, and the second point, the train has left the station and nobody heard from it since. But I am certain that eventually, oh, I know what it was. Um, I definitely think there are going to be some economic hardships and some economic pain that's going to happen as a result of this. And I think that what each and every one of us has to do, especially those of us that are privileged to um, have more than we need to survive, each and every one of us needs to say, you know what, the coming years, they're not going to be as prosperous as we thought they were going to be.
Yeah.
My wife and I were talking earlier this morning about how the state is having to spend huge amounts on combating the COVID-19 epidemic.
Hmm.
I can't imagine that we're not going to see budget cuts at the state level. And it seems to me that the most responsible thing to do is to ask all the stakeholders, meaning all the people that take out of that pie that is the state budget,
Yeah.
to essentially live with less. And so we've been talking in our household about how would we live with a 5%, 10%, 15% cut in income.
Yeah.
And I know that that's going to be easier for some folks than others. But I'll tell you, if the choice is my neighbors live and I have to deal with 15% reduction in my standard of living, or my day night and I get to keep living the way I am now, that choice is easy for me. I mean, cut my money.
Yeah.
And that's easy for me to say. I know I'm speaking from a relatively privileged position. There are people that don't have the margins that can afford them to do that. And that's where all of us that are privileged then have an added responsibility when this is over to help those folks get back on their feet. This is going to take a lot more than just, government issuing checks. It's going to take neighbors and community members ultimately standing up to help one another.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. So, um, I don't know. One of the things that I've seen that I kind of like, I think is kind of cool, is that a lot of these businesses are trying to stay open. I'm talking specifically food industry or service industry now. They're trying to do like drive-through. So you can't come in and eat, but you can order ahead and you can come in and pick up your food and drive home with it. That's kind of cool. It's kind of neat.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there are other industries that are going to have a much harder time with it. Like you and I both teach at Tracy High, and we're not a real digital place. We are not making this transition well. It's been rough. I know that I'm having some contact with my students through like Edmodo or through my Facebook videos, not Facebook, YouTube videos and things like that. But a lot of teachers just are not. We don't necessarily have these capabilities. And so as Tracy High, what do you think we're going to learn about this or learn from this? Do you think anything will change?
I'm going to be optimistic again, but notice I'm smiling while I'm being. Um, I think it has to change. I do think that Tracy High and probably many districts were caught flat-footed by this, and it goes back to what I said earlier. We have come to believe that normal isn't going to change. We are so comfortable in the normal that we have that we believe the normal is always going to go on just the way it always has. And I think what this is doing is it's waking us up and saying, no, normal sometimes can be not normal. And I think our district officials and I think the teaching staff and parents and students, I think we're all going to recognize that. And I do think you're actually going to see changes. I had hoped that Tracy High School for a number of years would become a one-to-one district. And I think that what you're going to see coming out of this is going to be an acceleration of our movement towards one-to-one, so that every student has an internet-capable device. I know the district my daughter's in, they are a one-to-one district. All the kids already have Chromebooks, which means they are able to proceed during this time period with much fewer hiccups than we are. Well, we're not really proceeding. We're kind of doing it teachers are doing what they can, but there's nothing official that's being done. So I'd
Yep.
like to say, yeah, I do think that we will learn from this. And you can't blame the powers that be for assuming that normal is going to be normal. We all assume normal is going to be normal. We all our lives are based on the idea that tomorrow is going to be much like yesterday, and we fall into that trap. And so my only hope is that the officials in our district are really going to say, all right, now's the time to make the change. And I know that they will find the staff responsive
Yep.
if they.
Yep. I think so too. I really hope so. I mean, I think really I was fortunate that I've been working on incorporating more technology into my classroom and working on a flipped learning kind of model. And so I have been making videos for a couple years, and I've been getting used to my kids um, doing everything digitally. And so my kids, we don't even turn in papers to me anymore. Everything's through Google Drive. So I give them a link, and they turn in their papers to that link. Um, so I think that's really cool, and I hope that going forward, I'm utilized to help people make that transition as well, because I've really enjoyed it and it's been a lot of fun. Um, so we'll see. I mean, we may go one to one. We may never go one to one. I mean, that's a big expense. It's a lot of work, and I just don't know. I don't know if it's going to happen. Um, but you and I have had this discussion quite a few times. My fear is going one to one. That's just the beginning of pushing teachers out of the classroom and putting technicians in the classroom because all the kids need is a computer. Um, and that's kind of my fear with this switch to technology.
I agree with you. And I'm going to tell you, we're not the only ones worried about that. I know my wife teaches at MJC, and the philosopher in her division basically says, what if they figure out that this works so well that they don't want to go back to the old model? And then where does that leave us? And I do think that's a problem. And I think it's a problem because education inherently, this is nice. I mean, it's nice to be able to see you. It's nice to be able to have a conversation that our students can see.
Yeah.
The idea that this is in any way, shape, or form a substitute for real people coming together and sharing socially together, I don't see it. I can't ever imagine running a philosophy discussion uh, that lives up to what our philosophy discussions do in class in this mode. I mean, this mode wouldn't be bad. You could achieve it, but you're achieving it at a big level. So
Yep, absolutely.
I do share that fear, but I think people like the social contact, and I think that as one of the things that this isolation experience is going to remind everybody is how much we like to see one another. How much? I mean, I know I've missed you guys. I've missed lunch. Lunch is something that is fundamentally important. I get to see my colleagues. We blow off some steam. Uh, Electronic communication is good, but it's not a substitute for the face-to-face.
Nope, absolutely not. No. So I think we're pretty close to the 30-minute mark. So let's go ahead and kind of segue into what now? So, what kinds of things can we do to keep ourselves busy until we do get to come back together? Hopefully, we get to come back together in a few weeks. Hopefully. But what if it's prolonged? So, what can we do to keep ourselves busy? What kind of advice would you give people?
Oh boy, I think you know what I'm going to say there, don't you?
I do. I think it's a good
As,
perspective.
once I got my schoolwork done this morning,
Yeah.
I started. I'm trying to make this so it'll actually work here. I don't know if that's going to be visible. This is the
Oh,
player's
yeah.
handbook for Dungeons and Dragons. My
Yep.
daughter is running a campaign starting tonight. Our family is playing Dungeons and Dragons together, and so one of the things that I think that this could potentially do is to really get families to start doing family activities again. And it doesn't have to be D&D. D&D is a great activity. It could be other board games. This is Splendor. Splendor got cheated out of the Spiel des Jahres here about 10 years ago. Fabulous
Bummer.
game. Um, so all silliness aside,
Sure.
and in fact, I am sitting in my game room. This is
Hmm.
one of my shelves here, and then we've got some. Actually, we'll do a little tour of the game room to see what we could look. Oh, Fallout Shelter. Yeah, that probably
Yep.
is. Well, and then the big game shelf over here. Obviously, lots and lots of games. And I know that sounds kind of silly and cheesy, and I know games aren't for everybody. But one of the things that board games do, and I'm talking about analog board games here, not board games or games that you're playing on the computer. They get people together around a table, face to face, doing things together, talking to one another. That's something that I think we are so desperate for in our society. We text one another, we tweet one another, but how often do we really come and sit down and do something with other live human beings? And I think this gives us a great opportunity to do just that.
Yeah. No, it's a fantastic chance to build relationships. So, how many games do you have in your game room, do you think?
In the game room, it's significantly less because the game room is actually the dining room of this house.
Okay.
We call it a dining room. We call it the game room. But my overall game collection. So that in this room, I'm looking around. I'm thinking maybe two and a quarter, 225.
Yeah.
But if you consider the games that I have in the garage, upstairs, in our bedroom, we have about 550 altogether
Okay.
board games. So
That's quite a bit.
that is,
So,
we won't run out of. If we played one game for every day of our quarantine, we could almost be going for 2 years
it's
and
crazy.
not have to repeat. So
Yeah, that's cool. So there are I'm sure there are people who are listening right now who are absolutely bored, and they're like, you know what? I'm going to give games a chance. So if someone had to go out and get a game right now, brave the quarantine and go get a game, try something new, what game would you suggest a beginner try?
I think that's a good question. But let me say something first of all is that I don't think braving the quarantine just to get a game is going to be worth it. I remember the social distancing
Of
is
course.
really important. However, you certainly can order online. And so that would allow you to, order a game and do so in the privacy of your own home and not have to go out and potentially put yourself or anybody else at risk. Uh, a couple of games that I would suggest. A perennial favorite of mine, and this is one the entire family can play, is any of the Ticket to Ride series. Ticket to Ride is a kind of a route building train game. Originally came out in 2005. It's based upon basically Rummy. You're doing set collection, but there's a map where you're putting trains down. Very accessible, very easy to play. Non-gamers pick it up very, very quickly. So that'd be a big recommendation. Another recommendation, especially for folks that haven't played games, would be Carcassonne. Carcassonne, named after the town in southern France, and it's a tile laying game. And again, very simple rule set, very very quick, very easy. I actually had a student yesterday. That's why this was out on the table. A student of mine said, "Hey, Mr. Haydock, we just got this new game and played it, and everybody loved it. This game is Splendor. It's a very quick game, plays in about maybe 20, 25 minutes, and it's incredibly tense. It's what's called an engine building game. Engine building games is where you build up this so that you could build up this so you could build up this. It's kind of like the gears in a car.
Yeah.
And this is one of the best engine builders we've ever discovered. Splender's available at Target. It's available on Amazon. It's just an overall great game. And I can't say enough also that if you are from a gaming background, this is a great time to play role-playing games. Role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons or Call of Cthulhu, things like that. Basically, what that is group storytelling. People sit around a table and they tell one another stories. I mean, it touches on the most basic of those human experiences. So definitely, since you're stuck at home, great time to play some D&D, to play some other role-playing games.
Yep. Very cool. So can you put Splendor up there again for just a second?
I will put Splendor here.
Fantastic. So you said that about 10 years ago it lost out on the Spielus Yardis?
Spielus Yaris. Now, see, modern board gaming, Mr. Alexander would make fun of me for this. Modern board gaming really originates in Germany. And Germany has been Germans have been designing these modern style board games probably for about 40, 50 years now. And beginning 1978, Germany started having an award called the Spiel des Jahres, which basically means the game of the year. There's actually a jury. People get paid to be on this jury, and they review games every year. And it's a big deal in Germany. There's actually media coverage of the Spiel des Jahres. And this game lost out a few years ago. It was up against another game called Camel Up, and Camel Up is a game that nobody ever hears about anymore because it wasn't very good. This one should have won the Spiel des Jahres. So in games, just like anything else, people get bitter when their favorite games don't win the prize, just like the Oscars.
Yep. Absolutely.
Except for nerds.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Haydock. That was a lovely chat for today.
Thank you, Mr. Nunn. It's been very enjoyable. I'm sad Mr. Chitwood was not able to join us.
Yeah, that poor sucker had to work. So it happens from time to time. All right. Well, thank you. I'll talk to you later.
Okay. See you later, Justin.
All right.
Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.
Young lady leaves her mother with no one to love her, to protect her from the world. And I have seen the monsters that will haunt her, that'll tear her all apart. And at her gravestone we can remember just where we were when we knew she would go. And I still remember the day that we left her. That's when she said that she knows how it goes. And we sang, your day will come, your day will come, your day will come. And no matter what they say, it won't matter if you pray or if you sin, 'cause in the end it's all the same. A young man becomes a soldier. He isn't much older than a boy, and that's a shame. They will lead him into battle and hand him a medal when he comes home rearranged. And at the say-so of a man with a halo, he will obey, he will fall into place, remembered by ribbons but never forgiven. He'll shoulder the bulk of the blame. What a shame. And we sing, your day will come, your day will a fellow man. I'd never work another hour, but I'd grow sour from the guilt and bitterness, and the luck of the draw will determine the falling, and everyone else will relax and move on. But what will you do when they come looking for you, friend? I hope that you're brave and you're strong through it all, and we'll sing. And your day will come, and your day will come, and your day will come, and no matter what they say, it won't matter if you pray or if you